Good morning and welcome to this introduction to the Gospel of Luke. Those of you who have been with us on Sunday mornings will know that we're no stranger to the book of Luke. In fact, we've been on a journey exploring the Gospel of Luke for a couple of years now, taking breaks on and off key events like Christmas and Advent and Lent and Easter and so on. And we're going to be coming to an end of Luke's Gospel in time for Advent this year. But over the next few days, the next 10 days or so, we're going to be exploring Luke's Gospel together in terms of what we're reading in our Bible through the year. Luke as a book is actually part one of a bigger kind of volume of work that encompasses Luke and the book of Acts. Luke is traditionally thought of to be the author of both the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts. Was a travelling companion of the Apostle Paul and was a physician, a doctor we read about in the New Testament as well. And there's a basic kind of breakdown to the book of Luke. You've got the first two chapters, which were kind of an introduction to Jesus, the coming of Jesus and John the Baptist and so on. You then got chapters 3 to the first part of chapter 9, which are kind of exploring Jesus's ministry, which includes that wonderful launching of his ministry in Nazareth, his hometown. You've then got the second part of chapter 9 all the way through to the first part of chapter 19, which is this kind of long journey that Jesus takes towards Jerusalem, preaching in the towns and the villages and so on as he goes. And then you've got the second part of chapter 19 all the way through then to the end of chapter 24, which deal with the last week really of Jesus's life, Holy Week, his death, his resurrection, and then his ascension into heaven, and then moving into the book of Acts. In terms of when it was written, we kind of dated around the early 60s AD, so it actually kind of picks up, or it was written, right where the events of the book of Acts finish. So even though the gospel obviously is about events that happened earlier, it was written after the events of the book of Acts had finished. You got this wonderful introduction. Sorry that my face went right up into the screen there as I leant in to get my Bible. We've got this wonderful introduction to Luke in chapter 1, where he says, many have undertaken to draw up an account of these things, which have been fulfilled amongst us, just as they were handed down to us by those who were the first eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may have certainty about the things that you were taught. We have no idea who Theophilus is and why he was most excellent, and why Luke was writing to him. But the desire that Luke has for writing to Theophilus is to assure him of the truth of what he'd been told, and to say, here's the evidence of all the things that you've heard and you've been taught about Jesus. I want to lay it out for you in an orderly kind of fashion, so that you can have confidence in what you believe. He also wanted to point out that the kind of rejection of Israel and the inclusion of the Gentiles into God's purposes were always kind of part of God's plan, that Israel and the Gentiles would be drawn together into the kingdom and to be part of God's purpose and God's plan. He wanted to clarify as well that Jesus' return wouldn't happen immediately after his resurrection. That's a key thing that Luke picks up. There's a period of waiting in between. Of course, we live in that period of waiting between the ascension of Jesus and the return of Jesus. And he wanted to emphasize that we need not fear any earthly power because of who Jesus is. And particularly for the people reading that gospel, first and foremost in that context would have been Rome. And so they needn't fear the power of Rome because they know that ultimately Jesus is the one who sits upon the throne. couple of things just to draw out of Luke's gospel for you. There is a real focus on the poor and the needy that we get in Luke's gospel, and we I was licking my finger, by the way, to turn a page in my Bible, not just simply testing the wind here in my study. Something we call the Nazareth Manifesto, which is the beginning of Jesus's ministry, where he's been tempted by the devil in the wilderness, and then he is launching his ministry in Nazareth. So he goes to Nazareth, where he's grown up. Says here, Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Holy Spirit, and good news about him spread throughout the whole countryside. And he goes to the synagogue, where he would have been many, many times as a child, where everyone would have kind of known him. And he's handed the scroll of the prophet Isaiah, and he unrolls it, and he finds the place where it is written, which is Isaiah chapter 61. The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, and to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour. And this wonderful Nazareth Manifesto, as it were, the manifesto of Jesus' ministry, is good news for the poor, for the captives, for the prisoners, for the oppressed. And there's a particular focus on that in the Gospel of Luke. The Holy Spirit is mentioned and emphasized more times in the Gospel of Luke than in any of the other three Gospels. There's a particular focus on the Holy Spirit. And I wonder whether that's because, of course, Luke is the writer of Acts, and Acts goes on to speak about the coming of the Holy Spirit, empowering the church and being the driving force between the growth of the church and the power behind the ministry of the church and the witness of the church. And because Luke has witnessed those accounts already when he writes the gospel, there is a particular focus then on the Holy Spirit in the gospel that he writes. So as we read these words, which of course we've been reading on Sundays on and off for a couple of years now, I pray that you might be reminded of the things that we've explored together, but you might be reminded of the good news of Jesus, and that because of faithful people like Matthew and Mark and Luke and John, who wrote down what they saw or what they'd heard from those who saw it, so that we can have confidence in what we believe. That, you know, you're not just believing in Jesus because somebody in Sunday school told you years ago and you've always believed it, or your parents told you, or so on. You are reading, when you read the Gospels here in your hands, when you read them, you are reading eyewitness accounts of what happened at the time, written down within the lifetime of the people who saw them, that you can have confidence in the things that you were taught and the things that you believe. And I pray that as you read, you get that sense of confidence. And I pray that you are really blessed as you read it. God bless you.